Up+Adam.
Tractor systems are offline.
We are Beyond FM.
Beyond FM.
The future of broadcasting is here.
Up+Adam with Adam Montiel. It's community content from Concentrate. It's Up+Adam with Adam Montiel.
Some say life is where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Yes, some say life is just where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Only to start again.
All right, back at it. True Crime Tuesday style. What's up? Thanks for being Up+Adam. My name is Adam Montiel. Now, true crime is one thing when you're listening on a long drive or binging in your earbuds. But what happens when you're no longer a fan of the genre? You're suddenly living inside it. It's exactly what happened to Lizz Rose, the daughter at the center of Hands Tied, a new gripping podcast from BBC Studios and iHeartPodcasts, hosted by award-winning journalist Maggie Katz. Hands Tied tells the story of a daughter's quest for justice, truth, and the heartbreaking possibility that her own mom, currently in prison for the crime, might be innocent. Later in the show, we'll be joined by Maggie herself, who's told stories for WNYC, Apple, The New Yorker, but this one stopped her in her tracks. It's going to be great to chat with Maggie Katz later on, Up+Adam, True Crime Tuesday style. Now, before that, I got a call to be a part of something pretty darn cool. I'm very excited about it. The Central Coast Writers Conference at Cuesta College. This thing's been around over 40 years, and it's legit. Writers, editors, agents, podcasters, poets, all coming together right here in SoCal for a weekend that's not about panels and name tags. It's about getting better at the thing we love, telling stories that matter. I'm leading a workshop on the art of the interview, which I'm nervous, excited, thrilled with. It's going to be a fun adventure. This isn't just for journalists. So anyone who wants to connect, create, and ask like they mean it, how to ask the kind of question that doesn't just get an answer, but opens someone up, how to hold space, hit rhythm, and kind of create that opportunity for the guest to go, wow, damn, that was a great question. So whether you're writing, podcasting, pitching, or just figuring out your voice, get in the room. This conference has real soul. I'd love to see you. We'll put a link in the show notes to the Central Coast Writers Conference, September 26th, 27th. I think I'm on that Saturday. All right, before we jump into our convo with Maggie, let me tell you about my friends at Life Elements, hidden in the back corner of a little plaza in A-Town, Atascadero, 7425 El Camino Real. Check out my friends Martha and Kurt and Life Elements. Wellness alchemy. That's what they're practicing. You see her whipping up stuff right as you walk in. Everything is small batch, cruelty-free, made with real healing in mind. In addition to their spot in Atascadero, which I definitely want you to visit. You could shop their products at the Hive in Arroyo Grande, the General Store in Paso, and of course, lifeelements.com. When you're on the website, use the promo code Adam, save 15%. Pretty cool. Lifeelements.com. Check them out, though. You're going to be glad you did. Let them know you heard them on Up+Adam.
It's Up+Adam with Adam Montiel.
All right, she is an award-winning journalist and audio storyteller who's worked with everyone from WNYC, The New Yorker, Apple, iHeart. But today, she's here to talk about a story that's as haunting as it is human. Maggie Robinson Katz is the host of Hands Tied, a powerful new true crime podcast from BBC Studios and iHeart. It's something right out of a true crime doc, but it's all too real. Woman found tied up in a closet, her husband murdered, and the daughter, Liz, who's a true crime junkie, wanted to start her own thing from what I understand, caught in the middle, convinced the justice system got it wrong. The show follows Lizz Melgar Rose, whose father was the one that was brutally murdered, and whose mom, now in prison, she believes is innocent. The story goes beyond really mystery and evidence. It's about a daughter's fight, a journalist's responsibility, and the emotional weight of telling the truth when no one else will. Maggie, super excited to meet you. Thanks for being Up+Adam.
Hey, Adam.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
I love that dog that you have as your
Oh, that's
Zoom.
That's Georgie. That's Georgie.
Very cute.
Maggie, it is awesome to have you here. Thank you so much for being Up and Adam. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks. You too. I know it's early out there.
Where are you right now?
I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh my gosh. Wow. How was your summer?
Summers are great in Minnesota.
Right.
We did have a lot of wildfires, unfortunately, from coming down from Canada. But like, I never was a summer person. I'm not from Minnesota originally, but like Minnesota has really made me love summer.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. I want to see what a real winter is like too. I've never.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm from Colorado originally, and the Minneapolis winter is nothing that I've ever experienced. Your eyeballs freeze and like you can feel it inside your nose. It is wild.
Now, you've told stories, Maggie, that win awards, but Hands Tied feels like a story that really just breaks hearts. I mean, it's layered, it's painful, it's deeply personal, and it's not just for Liz, but for you as the person holding the mic. When did this story stop feeling like maybe just another podcast and start feeling almost like a responsibility to you?
That's a great question. And I'm really glad that comes through. I think we really wanted to both tell, an engaging story, but for us, it was important to tell a very human, emotional story. So I'm really glad to hear that came through to you. For me, I think Liz and I connected pretty early on, just in the fact that we are both daughters who took on the task of trying to understand what happened to our late fathers. I have no idea what it's like to go through what Liz went through with her dad, and to lose a parent in that way. That's absolutely horrible. But, for me, my dad was embroiled in a Philippine-based gold scam that this American guy over there got him into. He lost all of his money. And I think both Liz and I connected on both being daughters who wanted to figure out what happened to our dads.
Yeah, Liz didn't just experience this tragedy. She decided to investigate it. And that pivot from grieving daughter to amateur sleuth it's a seismic, stride. What did it feel like to sit across from someone who used to listen to true crime and now was the story?
Yeah, I mean, Liz wasn't just a listener in true crime. She really wanted to pursue it as a career. And she actually got into a program in England to study criminal psychology. And I mean, like Liz and I think it really comes through in the podcast, she is a tenacious fighter, and she is pretty incredible. And she said, I remember her telling me that she is good in a crisis, and she kind of pivoted her brain, and I don't think allowed herself to grieve in that moment, because, she went from being like, I can't believe this is happening to my dad, to then having to go and, work with the police and investigate and try to find the person who was responsible for this heinous crime.
The title Hands Tied is stark. It's visceral. But the more we listen, the more we realize it's about more than just that crime scene. Who else in this story you feel had their hands tied? And in what ways? Was the jury, the police, and you as a journalist?
I mean, gosh, Hands Tied isn't evocative. For us, it's to describe the actual way that Liz's mom, Sandy, was found. She was found in a closet with her hands and feet tied. But, hands tied as an expression, gosh, I think sometimes the systems have their hands tied and how they sometimes process these things.
True crime now is just booming, but it can start to feel, like a formula in a way. And you said you wanted to keep Hands Tied, really wanted to transcend the typical tropes. Is there a cliche of true crime storytelling that maybe you kind of refuse to want to step into or include, and why?
For me, I'm very interested in people and human stories. And I think for us, we really wanted to follow Liz and her journey. So I think the most important thing for us, true crime, it's shocking. It's always it can be, and I have a lot of respect. It's very hard to make podcasts. It's very hard to tell stories. And it's hard to get people to like be interested in watching or listening to them. And so sometimes you have to get all the gory details there to get people hooked into it. And for us, we really wanted to cement in Lizz's story and her journey. And I think that does make this story unique in some ways, where we are in the footsteps of the daughter of the victim as this is all unfolding, as she's learning about all of this. And the listener finds out as she does too.
Now, Lizz believes her mom is wrongfully imprisoned, and that's not just a legal opinion. That's really a daughter's like heartbreak. How did you kind of navigate telling a story that challenges a conviction without, maybe accidentally putting yourself on the witness stand or too close? Like, did you ever feel the weight of that responsibility pressing back at you?
Spoiler alert, Adam. I think, for us, Lizz is working tirelessly to get her mom out of prison because she believes that Sandy, her mom, is wrongfully convicted for the crime, and is still working tirelessly to prove it. She's working with the Innocence Project of Texas, who is going through some of the DNA records now and retesting things. And there are some updates in the case, but in the series, I do ask Lizz, I ask her that, some people who are listening, they might feel like it's hard enough to accept that your dad has been murdered, but then to accept that your mom has murdered is an even bigger hard, that's impossible to accept. And, Lizz immediately, and she said that if she believed her mom did this, like, she would cut off all ties with her mom, that she would not, she has children, she wouldn't want them to be around her mom. And, she really, really tried to take a look at all of the evidence and remove any bias that she has. And, Liz she's fierce and she's tenacious. And I do think if she believed that her mom killed her dad, that she wouldn't be fighting as hard for her.
Maggie, because I'm on the inside of like storytelling and editing, and I'm also fascinated by the process. Behind every great podcast is an edit bay full of decisions, right? What to include, what to cut, what to protect, right? What was the hardest, maybe soundbite to leave out, or a piece of prod to leave out of Hands Tied? Something that maybe shook you, but it didn't make the final cut. And do you ever worry about the stories that never get told and that are left on the cutting room floor?
It's so hard. And, we all worked together. It was a great team at the BBC. And, we all went through all of the audio and all of the tapes. And it is impossible to know. Sometimes you have to cut things in order to tell a cohesive story, because I think if you get all of the information out to a listener, like, then it just becomes a bombardment of facts and details. The one thing that is hard, and I am sad that it's not in it, is, it's hard for us to describe the whole crime scene and how it looked, because there's no audio on the archival that we had. So it's just the camera. And, we tried a bunch of different ways and we describe it lightly in the podcast, but to do like a deep dive of the crime scene is one thing, that was a hard decision to cut, but it does come through in like smaller ways. But we really tried to do like a focus in on it. But in order to tell the cohesive story, we have to leave some stuff out.
And with everything you've covered, mafia tapes, long cons, wrongful convictions, you've developed a real knack for finding that human story. Has the mic almost ever felt heavy because of all of that?
I mean, it's a very important honor that we have to have as journalists, as radio makers, to treat it with respect and to treat everybody who we talk to with the respect. It's a vulnerable thing to talk and share your story, and you have to do it with trust and respect. I take it very seriously.
I could definitely tell. And to get this story, you really had to earn Lizz's trust while she was still navigating grief, trauma, trying to find hope. How do you earn trust with someone whose life has already been torn apart by the system?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to connect as people. And, I've had my own loss in my life. And to share that with someone, to be like, I don't know exactly how you feel, but like, I know how grief feels. I know how loss feels. And, to start there. And I also think it's important, like when you're talking, getting to know someone, to not talk about the case, or to not talk about, like I wanted to really know Lizz as a person, and the music that she likes, and like the things that make her laugh, and like the things that make her who she is outside of this tragedy that happened to her.
Speaking of music, did I read correctly that you're part of a Dolly Parton cover band?
I am, yeah. Doll parts.
Doll parts, right. There's something kind of poetic about that. Like you're balancing this joy with these stories in a way. And it's like, how do you personally hold both? Being someone obviously we punch out. We love the things that we love. But being someone who celebrates this immense joy on stage, and I mean, I got to see that. And then also confronting a lot of really heavy stuff at work.
I think it's all part of the same thing. Life is both joy and sorrow. And I think if you can hold both. And like in our shows, I want to say, if anybody's like, I got to see doll parts. Yes, you do. But we don't dress up as Dolly. We don't wear wigs. We don't stuff our bras. We like joke that it takes 3 of us to sing as well as Dolly, and that we're like a rock band that just happens to exclusively play Dolly Parton's music.
Yeah.
But, in it, Dolly sings about heartbreak. Dolly sings about tragedies that have happened in her life and in other lives. So like there is joy, but Dolly really encapsulates both the good and the bad. And I think both when we're doing a show, even though it's a Dolly Parton cover band, and like even telling these important stories, I do believe they're the same things, because it's holding space for people to have experiences.
Yeah. Oh, I love how you put that. This podcast might not get Lizz the exact justice that she wants, but it might change how people see this case. And that is huge. If justice isn't guaranteed, what do you feel is the best outcome you hope for in telling this story like this?
Exactly how you said. I hope that people research the case. I hope if they believe in Sandy's innocence, that if they want to get involved and learn more about what the Innocence Project of Texas is doing, and if they don't believe in Sandy's innocence, I hope that at least they can really sympathize with the human story, which is Lizz, and the tragedy of essentially losing 2 parents.
When you challenge a conviction, I'm so curious, even with care, I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's blowback from either institutions or from listeners or even from families. What kind of heat, if any, have you felt launching this podcast, or maybe in any of the work that you've done? And did any of it surprise you?
I don't think it ever is surprising. I think that, for institutions, it's hard. It's really hard to get convictions overturned, because no one wants to admit that they did something wrong. So I'm never surprised when there's blowback. When I did my first podcast, I was surprised that there was some blowback with some of my dad's friends. And like that really surprised me, just because it was like on a personal level, and it was a very personal story. And so like that's the only time I've been surprised. But, it ain't my first rodeo now, Adam.
As journalists, we sometimes, we're chasing facts, but, sometimes your gut might say, oh, something's off, even when the documents don't. Was there a moment in this case where your intuition lit up louder than maybe even the evidence?
I think that's a great question. And I think that it's so important when we're looking at these cases and looking at the facts and the documents, to not get swayed by our own bias and our own sort of like ideas about things. So I sometimes just want to learn so much. So I think in this case, I just was like trying to understand every little facet about it. And like, luckily I also had such a great team who also like dove into everything with us. So I think we really tried to go facts before intuition.
You met Lizz as a subject and you left her knowing you knew something a lot more. I'm curious how your perception of Lizz changed from that first email or phone call to now. And, there's something sacred about telling someone else's story, especially when it's raw. Still, like, being unpacked. What was the hardest part of carrying someone else's truth through your own voice?
Yeah, that's a very important thing to discuss because it is such an important thing and it is such an important mark of trust. You know, I like Liz. I think that she's really funny. I think she's really smart. And, you know, I always hate it when people say this to me, but I told her this too. I was like, she is incredibly strong. And all of those things, you know, I really enjoyed spending lots of time with her in England. And I think the thing that I love about Liz is that she is who she is. You can ask her anything. And she also doesn't hide away from the darker parts of her past, as a rebellious teen, and that, like she wasn't this great kid all of the time. Who was? Nobody was. And she really is vulnerable and lets people see who she is and doesn't shy away from it. So I left London, just really thinking that Liz was incredible. And, on a deeply personal note during this story, my own mom died. And, out of a lot of people, Liz was the person who knew exactly what to say because she knows tragedy more than anybody else.
I'm really, really sorry to hear that. Yeah, no, I feel like my mom passed away probably 21 years ago now, and it still feels like yesterday. So
yeah, it never gets easier.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry about your mom, too.
No, very sweet. I'm curious, Maggie, the podcast or maybe the radio show that made you fall in love with audio, with storytelling, with all of this.
The one that I listened to? Yeah,
or maybe some you growing up that you would listen to, or maybe it was in the podcast realm and era. Can you think of some that really made you go, wow, that's some fantastic storytelling. I'm going to kind of chase that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So growing up, my dad was a radio executive and owned a bunch of radio stations.
Wow.
Yeah, he owned Transtar, which then merged with Dick Clark's Unistar. So radio was kind of always in my DNA in some ways.
Sounds like my dream. This is awesome.
Yeah. I never, ever thought that I was a theater kid and I just wanted to do theater. So it's very funny to me that now I'm a podcast radio person and the person in my family who's following in my father's footsteps the most.
Yeah.
But the show, is This American Life. It's what made me fall in love with audio storytelling. I have visceral memories of, I was living in Paris at the time, and when I was feeling homesick, I would listen to This American Life, and Ira Glass would talk me through some, difficult times of living abroad.
Yeah. Now, when all the episodes are in the rearview mirror, they're out, people have heard it all, what do you really hope they feel in that silence after that final fade?
I hope that, like I've been saying, whether you believe in Sandy's innocence or guilt, I hope that people re-examine how they think about true crime and the people who it impacts, because these are real people with real lives who are going through the most horrible thing. And it's easy for us when we're listening or reading or taking it from the other side to think about how we would react to it, or to think about these people not as people. And I really hope that people, when they're listening, can at least sympathize and really feel for Liz and the dual tragedies that she's experiencing.
Maggie, I totally love your take on that. We're where the Christian Smart case happened. And of course, the Your Own Backyard podcast was huge. But true crime is one thing, and those lines get blurry when it's in your backyard, no pun intended. And the family is listening to your broadcast on your radio show talking about it. And, it becomes very real, and you want to be very sensitive, and you're really a vehicle for that mission. So it's been really a pleasure to talk to you. I'm so glad it was for 20 minutes, and I really got to get to know you. This was rad.
Yeah.
Appreciate you a lot.
Thanks. I really appreciate you too, Adam. Thank you so much.
Let's do it again sometime. Thanks for being up and Adam.
Sounds good. Yeah, sounds good.
Start again.
All right, big thanks to Maggie Katz for joining us today, pulling back the curtain on what it's really taken to tell a story like that, like Hands Tied. Available wherever you get your podcasts. We'll put links in the show notes to the show and also to Maggie on Instagram. All right. Thank you so much for connecting with us here each day, or any day for that matter. Appreciate you very much. Moonshiner Collective, appreciate you too. streaming the, everywhere you get your streams. MoonshinerCollective.com. You want to learn more about the band. They give us original music on the show called Start Again. Thanks to our friends at Tambre Winery, TambreWinery.com, Timbre. Taste their wines in the village of Arroyo Grande. They got a charming tasting room for you there. And I thank them for the Tambre Lobro Studios, TambreWinery.com. Yep. Brand new episode of Where Wine Takes You, just published yesterday. A little late because Friday and Thursday were chaotic days, to say the absolute least. Chatting with Josh Beckett of Thibodeau and Ecluse Wines, as well as Mike Adams. Mike is a guy from Orange County, but he's got a Facebook group that he started during COVID just to celebrate Paso wine. And now it's like 25,000 members strong, or close to. It's a beast of a Facebook page, Paso Robles Wine Fanatics. We'll talk to Mike Adams also on the latest episode of Where Wine Takes You. Available now wherever you podcast, wherever you're hearing this, you can hear that. And you can also go to PasoWine.com. All right, till tomorrow. I appreciate you rating, reviewing, subscribing, letting folks know, sharing with a friend what we're doing here on Up and Adam. I'm Adam Montiel. Hope you have a great day. Hope your week's going fantastic. Till tomorrow, thanks for being Up and Adam.
Some say life's where it begins. Straight to the stars is where it ends. Only to start again. Let's start again. We'll start again. Let's start again.